This is the Litigator's Edge podcast with your host, Aniket Sawant.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Litigator's Edge, a podcast where innovative attorneys reveal the strategies that have transformed their legal practice. My name is Aniket Sawant, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Threadio. It's my pleasure to have Amanda Baggett on the show today. Amanda is one of the owners of Baggett Law, a respected injury law firm in the Jacksonville, Florida area. Amanda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you to share either a fun fact about yourself or a cringe joke. Which will it be?
I will share a fun fact about myself. And that fun fact is that I successfully do what most people say they could never do, which is I work with my husband.
Yes, that's awesome. So in the lead up to this podcast, Amanda, one of the things that really stood out about Baggett Law to me was your firm's focus on mission and values. Can you speak a little bit to that and how that drives the work that you do for your clients?
Sure, absolutely. So our mission is something that we put a lot of time thinking about, what really is the mission of our firm and what makes our firm different. Of course, there's so many law firms to choose from. And so when my husband and I sat down to think about this, it really had to be something that was personal to us and that made our firm stand out among the rest. And so that was something we spent a lot of time working on. And then our core values was the same thing. With our core values, we wanted to make sure it was things that we truly feel our team embodies and not aspirational goals. And so with those two things nailed down as our guidepost, it's really helped us, I think, in hiring and creating the team that we want and making sure not only are we onboarding the right people for our team, but that everyone that joins Baggett Law really knows what they're in for and what we stand for to make sure that it's a culture fit.
That's pretty cool. And can you please share a little bit more about what Baggett Law does, what areas you cover, geographies you're most active in, so on and so forth?
Absolutely. We represent clients in Georgia and Florida, and we're personal injury exclusively, and we handle various types of cases from medical malpractice cases to dog bite cases, slip and falls, a lot of car accident cases, trucking accidents, motorcycle accidents, really, just a very broad array of different case types we handle under that personal injury and wrongful death umbrella.
Sounds good. And are you mainly plaintiff or do you do some defense or what's the split?
No, only plaintiffs. So we only represent injured victims and their families in these types of cases.
That's pretty cool. So moving from the firm's focus to a focus on you. So I think of every attorney who joins me on this podcast as a superhero. And of course, every superhero has an origin story. What's yours?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my origin story, I would say, started when I was a little girl. I wanted to be a police officer very badly. That was just my dream to one day be able to go around helping people. I think I had a very vivid imagination, and I thought all the things I could do to help the world as a police officer. As I got a little bit older, I think the dangerous part of being a police officer scared me a little bit, and I then learned about law school and becoming a lawyer. I didn't have any lawyers in my family, and I didn't really know any lawyers growing up, and so it's something that I thought, well, let me, pursue this, and so I did. I've always wanted to help people, and I believe when I became a mother, I think it kind of even opened that door even wider for me. I really wanted to help families, children, and really I kind of understood the world in a little bit different way. I think becoming a mother and knowing how one person being injured can really impact the whole family.
Yep, that makes sense. One of the things I was looking at when I was researching your firm was your focus on driving impact for your clients, the relentlessness that you have, and then also treating clients like a friend or family member. Can you share an example of a situation where these values led to a favorable outcome for a client?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to think that these types of values matter in every single case that we handle for every single client, but it is something that one of our core values is to take it personally, to imagine that the work we're doing is for a beloved relative. Maybe it's a favorite aunt or a grandmother, and how would we want them to be treated in the same situation? What level of effort would we want to put in that same situation? And so again, oftentimes family is important to me. A recent example, I represented a client in a motorcycle accident. He was this amazing father of children, worked hard every day. And I think about my own father and my own father's sacrifices that he made in his life going to work every day. and that things can happen in the blink of an eye. And so I kind of channeled that, my love and my passion for my own family, I think, in every case that I handle, and I was relentless, and I think that helped us to get a favorable outcome.
That's outstanding. When you look back at the sweep of your career, what are some key cases or matters that sort of changed your viewpoint on how you approach litigation? And what did you change after that particular milestone?
Sure, absolutely. So, the first part of my career, I spent at a large law firm defending corporations. Specifically, I was defending engineers and contractors in injury and wrongful death cases. And I will tell you that I think one of the defining moments for me was taking the deposition of someone who had lost her husband in a car accident. They were suing our client, who was the engineering firm, and while my position at the time was that the engineering firm did nothing wrong, and I still think that's correct. Just seeing the turmoil that she had gone through and being the one that had to ask the questions about how had her life changed, I think that for me that was kind of a pivotal moment, that first deposition of someone who had lost their husband, that made me really just think about which side I wanted to be on. Did I want to continue helping big corporations? And while that work was very fulfilling and I did love it, there are a lot of individuals and families that really need a strong advocate, and I knew that if I switched sides that I could use all that knowledge to help them in ways that maybe some other attorneys haven't had that experience and can't leverage those skills to do.
That's wonderful. How long ago was this, and when did you and your husband decide to make the decision to join forces and come on the plaintiff side?
Sure. So my husband and I met years ago working at that large law firm that I was just telling you about. He always had a dream to open his own law firm, and so he eventually did that in 2012. I stayed at the law firm I was at. I really enjoyed it. I had become a partner, was having a thriving career, but I was traveling a lot. And so in 2015, I decided to join Matt at Baggett Law. And so we're coming up in June, will be a decade for me working with
Oh,
them.
wow.
Yeah,
Congratulations. That's
thank you.
fantastic. Um, Obviously now with you have this thriving career with along with your husband and your family, but you're also the owners of the law firm. How do you balance the demands that these two typically firewalled components have in most people's life? How do you make all of it work?
That's a great question. And I think for us, one of our core values is that you have to be well to do well. And so I don't know that you can separate the two, but I think you have to balance in, you have to be physically well, you have to be mentally healthy, physically healthy, spiritually healthy. And all of those things, if you have those things in order, then that's going to enable you, I think, to come to work and to be more productive, happier team member, and all those sorts of things. So I really think those two things go hand in hand, and one can't be ignored, or things get out of balance and other things fall down.
Makes sense. Over the past 12 or 13 years since you and your husband joined forces, I learned that your firm has been featured on the prestigious Inc. 5000 list of some of the fastest growing companies and firms in the United States. So that's a remarkable achievement. Congratulations. Can you speak to what it took to get there? And what advice would you have for a law firm or an attorney who would have similar aspirations?
Absolutely. I would say that the number one thing that got us to that point and the growth, the pivotal, kind of skyrocketing growth that we've had is to be lifelong learners. No matter what conversation you're having as a lawyer, business owner, you can always learn something from someone else. And I think for us, we don't look around and see a bunch of competitors in our market. We look around and see a bunch of people we can learn from. And I cannot tell you how many of those connections, just maintaining connections with other lawyers in the community, going to lunch with people, going to dinner with people, just keeping in touch, how many things I have just learned from them and listened and picked up little clues. And I've thought, let me look into that. Let me see, how that would work. And just little things like that. I think I've just, Matt and I've had a very open mindset and learned a lot over the years, and we've tried it. So we've been open to learning, and we've been open to taking risks. And you can't fail if you don't try.
That's that words to live by for sure. Building up on that, so if you were to go back and give your advice to yourself as a junior attorney, knowing all the things you know today and seeing all the things that you've seen up to today, what would it be?
I would say, again, I think it's about having an open mindset, being a lifelong learner, and really taking risk. I think that, that's what I would say. I would say go for it. Take the risk. Believe in yourself, and even if you fail, you can still get back up and, get going again. I think there's a popular quote that failure stops more dreams than anything else. So
That makes sense. Um, Coming back to how your law firm works, so how do you and Matt split your roles? I understand that you focus a lot on the hiring, and perhaps Matt handles some other duties. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
yeah, absolutely. So Matt oversees the legal work. Matt's the managing partner that oversees all of the cases. I am more focused on strategic vision, client development, client experience, marketing, those sorts of things.
Got it. Now, taking a step back and looking at some of the strategies that your firm has used to deliver great results for your clients, what's a somewhat unconventional litigation strategy that you'd say that you've used that gave you a competitive edge and that delivered great results for your clients?
Well, I think that other lawyers can relate to this, and it may surprise some non-lawyers, but I think what sets us apart and gives us an advantage is that we're aggressive. So as soon as we can set the case for trial, we do it. We try to file a lot of offensive motions. We have an offensive game plan from day one, and it includes speed. So things like when we get discovery requests from the other side, I always tell my team we need to, look at this as a game. How quickly can we get the answers back to them? Because having been on the other side, I know nothing startles a defense attorney more than speed from the other side. So, unfortunately, I think a lot of lawyers delay, not intentionally, but they have a lot of work. And so cases tend to linger and hang on for longer than they should. But we try to be in the driver's seat and push our cases very, very quickly and have this offensive, kind of aggressive push from day one.
That's wonderful. So it's almost like you're planning it out like a football game where you're just kind of planning your moves and executing on them as rapidly as you can.
Yes.
That's outstanding. If I think about speed, that's an interesting. I think this is a good segue to this next part of our conversation. The speed that you have, that your firm has, is probably driven by three components, right? People, the people that you have, the processes that you follow, and then also the technology that you use. So if we focus on that last part, how has technology changed your approach to case and trial preparation? How has it helped you operate with the speed that you do in order to get the results that you need?
There are so many ways that technology has helped us for sure. I could just pick a few examples. I think that obviously technology enables us to track metrics. And so we know, for example, where every single phone call that comes into our office, where they saw our firm, where they got the phone number, where they called from. I mean, that's fascinating. So first of all, I think we're just really in touch with the clients that we serve and how they're finding us. So I think that kind of lays the groundwork. But then actually in, the casework that we do, AI it's truly amazing. There are so many different platforms out there, software, whether it's discovery software, demand packages, things where you can use it to fine tune the work that you're already doing to elevate that a little bit. We've tried several different things like that. We have a system where our clients know where their case is, what status their case is in.
Right.
We've used something like that. It's kind of like refer to it kind of as the domino pizza tracker. We have tried
Right.
that. Now, I'll tell you, not all of these things have worked, of course. Some of these are newer technologies, but we've tried them, and we're constantly open to improving our firm with these various technology tools.
Very cool. So on that note, how do you evaluate which new technologies or approaches are worth implementing? What gets to stay and what's voted off the island, so to speak?
That really comes down to client feedback. Just listening to our clients, being very open. One of our core values is that feedback is a gift, and whether it's positive feedback or negative feedback. And so we're constantly checking in with our clients and trying to figure out, how do our clients like to communicate best. So if we have, for example, we tried a technology that used text messaging as a way for our clients to complete their discovery requests. And initially we thought, well, this will be a success because everyone's on their phones. They can be on their sofa and they can be answering these questions. But it turns out our clients by and large didn't like that. They liked the old-fashioned, here in an email are the questions, and then have a phone call with them and come up with the answers. And so it really was based on our client, just their feedback really, and how they use the technology or didn't use it. If they're not using it, it means it's not user friendly, and we should probably
Right.
move on to something else.
Makes sense. Amanda, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you've gone out for lunches and so on and so forth with fellow attorneys. And so, and obviously attorneys span a pretty broad spectrum from being pretty tech forward, such as yourself, to being maybe not. And so if you meet a fellow attorney who is maybe on the other end of the spectrum, what advice would you give to them, in terms of the use of technology in their practice and workflows to assuage any concerns that they may have?
I would say to be open to it. I definitely think to listening to your team. Oftentimes we have weekly team meetings, and very often we ask the team for feedback. What could we be doing better? And they know that it's not a trick. They don't all have to say, no, everything's perfect. So oftentimes, we've had suggestions from the team, hey, why don't we try this? Or I heard about this software. Have you guys ever considered, doing it this way? So we're very open to trying new things when it comes to technology. And again, some of it has worked, some of it hasn't. But the stuff that hasn't worked, we feel as though, we gave it our best shot. And it's still helped us to improve our process one way or another, just having gone through that experience.
Very cool. Looking ahead, obviously technology is moving at a million miles a minute today, and some of it is valuable, as you mentioned, and some of it is not. From your perspective, where do you see some of the biggest opportunities for innovation in litigation over the next few years? Where should folks be, on the technology side, be focusing their attention on to enable attorneys such as yourself to deliver better results?
I would say I really think that it is the technology with regard to documents and what we do. I've seen various studies that if you have, humans reviewing medical records, for example, even the best people reviewing medical records, over time there's a certain level of fatigue or what have you, and they miss things here and there. But the technology is a little bit more accurate, a little bit better, and so sometimes the technology can see patterns and pick up on things, and we're talking in thousands of pieces of paper that maybe a human can't. And so I think that is absolutely, it's already here, it's already very helpful, but I think it will continue to get better, continue to improve efficiencies. I think the technology will only, become more and more refined for different uses. So I really think that is something that it's critical. It's here, people are using it already, but I think it'll get better.
Wonderful. All right. So as we come to more or less of a close, what are some resources that you'd recommend, either technology related or not? They could be related to, how you hire people, what processes you use. What are some resources that you'd recommend to litigators who are also looking to gain an edge in today's legal environment?
Well, I would definitely say podcasts, which is ironic that we're here on a podcast, but again, if I was talking earlier about going to lunch with different people, but podcasts are also great because you don't have to go to lunch with them, but you're learning a lot about what they're doing. And if people are on these podcasts talking about what works for them, then give it a try. So I am also a big podcast junkie. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love that. So that's definitely one thing that I would say is a way to, get an edge.
Wonderful. All right. So final question for you, Amanda. Is there a question that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
I think the only question that we had talked about early on was about kind of how we've developed our team and hiring and that sort of thing to staff up for our growth. That would be the only subject area I'd say.
Okay. So, we can talk about that. What would you like to share about how you did that and how that's contributed to your growth?
Yeah, so I would say that the one thing that we started doing years ago that is different, I think, than some other firms is that we hire based on personality versus resume. We don't hire just on if someone has experience. We try to find the right culture fit for us, and then we know that we can train the person to do that job.
That's perfect because you can always develop skills, but you can't develop somebody or change somebody's personality. So
Absolutely. I'd say that that has been huge for us. And another thing that we have done through hiring is we think about the role that person will play. So for instance, with intake, we take our hiring process very, very, very slowly. We use a task as part of the interview process, something that's going to be similar to what they will be doing in the job to see how they will really perform in a similar situation. But for instance, our intake interviews, we purposefully did not see them. No, we didn't even do a Zoom interview, because we know that for most people, their interactions are only going to be on the telephone. And so we wanted to make sure that those candidates, before they moved to the next round, that we could feel them smiling just through the phone call. And even, we gave them mock tasks to do an email response to a potential client. So those sorts of things, really thinking about the role they're going to fill, because it doesn't matter if they are the most professionally dressed, polished, everything else, and have all the skills and the best resume on the planet. If they're not good with people on the phone, it doesn't matter.
Right. I think your focus on the task that they're actually going to do in their job is brilliant, because I think we've all, seen in hiring situations where somebody presents themselves in the controlled confines of an interview, and then you might see a different side to them when they're actually doing the job. So this is a great way to filter that out. So awesome. All right. With that, thank you so much, Amanda, for your time. I really appreciate you making the time for us and for sharing your insights with our audience. And I look forward to seeing more and more success from the Baggett Law Firm in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Litigator's Edge podcast, brought to you by Threadio.